Hi, my name is Kama Ross, and I serve as the district forester for the Benzie Conservation District. I'm here to help you identify three pretty common trees in northern Michigan that I think you'll easily be able to find out your back door, and just to kind of look at what characteristics will help you identify what tree you're looking at. Right now, we're standing next to this American beech, Vegas grandifolia, and there are quite a few distinguishing characteristics. Number one, this branch has buds from that'll be next year's leaves already set and ready to go, being protected here until spring. And then it's also still hanging on to its leaves from last year. And this beech will do that. Some oaks do it too, but beech always holds on to their leaves, and they're pretty easy to identify. They've got some nice little spikes on the edges and a beautiful light brown color. The buds are arranged and the leaves are arranged on what's called alternate pattern. A tree can either be opposite, like a maple, or alternate, like this beech. So they're staggered, not directly opposite one another as you go down the branch. And the bud itself is like no other. It's cigar shaped and kind of pointy at the end. In fact, if you don't have your glove on, it'll actually prick your finger a little bit. So the cigar shaped pointy buds are very, very indicative that you've got yourself a beech tree. And then the alternate pattern, the leaves that are hanging on with some nice teeth on the side. And then last is the bark. And there is no other bark that's as smooth. And this is a young tree, but even as it gets older, it'll remain smooth and gray and pretty thin. And we kind of like to think about the skin of an elephant, it can remind you of. And some will have beech scale on it, which is unfortunately a non-native insect that's feeding on them. But this one looks pretty clean, except for this gypsy moth nest here right there. So here's our American beech. A lot of really great ways to be able to identify this tree for you. So this is my favorite conifer evergreen tree in Michigan. It's called the eastern hemlock, and it's quite common in areas that have a little bit more moisture because it likes its feet wet. Here we're in a swamp along the Platte River. It's a super easy one to identify because it is an evergreen, and it'll retain these beautiful dark green needles throughout the year. They're super short, less than a half inch in length, and they're very dark green on the top side, and underneath, if you look closely with your naked eye or a hand lens, you'll see two rows on each needle of white line, which is the stomata, which is the opening where the leaves exchange the gases in order to photosynthesize. So that's a really distinguishing characteristic of the eastern hemlock. The other thing is that it's a super good wildlife tree, and these teeny tiny cones, I have three in my hand, might be really tiny, but inside are the most nutritious by weight seed for a lot of birds and small mammals. So birds will come here and get some thermal cover with these beautiful green needles, and they'll get some great nutritious food from these cones. It's a beautiful tree. Looking up, the bark isn't real distinguishable, but look for the needles that are always present, and you'll know the eastern hemlock. So this is actually the most common tree in the whole state of Michigan. Doesn't matter if you live in Detroit or the western end of the UP, the sugar maple is the one you're going to find most commonly. It's also one of the most valuable for timber because it produces beautiful light wood that's good for so many uses for construction. Um, it's the most important thing to think about with maple is the branching pattern. We only have really three trees native to Michigan that have what's called opposite, where the branches come off the stem opposite each other, just like your arms do. I like to think about that. And that's maple trees, all maples, ash, and dogwood. So this is obviously not a dogwood because we don't have large dogwoods like this. And everybody probably knows the ash has really like rectangle, triangular branch pattern. So this is the sugar maple. And right here we have a stem of a red maple, but both are opposite, where you look for the branching and the buds coming out exactly opposite, not alternate like the beech was earlier. The bark on a maple tree is really very variable. So I really have trouble giving anyone a concrete identification tool because depending on the site where it's growing, a really good site, it'll be really smooth and almost white. On a worse site, it might be really black and very furrowed, like this one. There are some things around the branches that help identify the maple trees, and I actually like to think of it as a Fu Manchu mustache. Around the branch whorls, where a branch still is or was and has fallen off, you might see an upside down triangle or an arrow pointing up around the branch stub, and that is very indicative that that's a maple tree. Other than that, though, look for the opposite branching. The buds are kind of really beautiful, layered, lots of different scales on them that make them very interesting to draw with a very fine pencil. But maple, most common tree in the state of Michigan.